I'm Eleanor Dowdy, and this is a video about the making of my new book, A Walk in the Market, which is all about Pike Place Market, one of my favorite places to sketch and hang out in Seattle. There's about 30 of my favorite sketches I've done there over the last 8 or 9 years, all connected in a walking route you can make by following this map. Each of the numbers coordinates to one of the pages in the book, like this, so you can find it and see what I was seeing there. There's also a little blurb about that place. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the idea behind it and the technical creation of all of these different parts, which I did by hiring local businesses, supporting other creators in my community in Seattle, and doing as much by hand as I can. It was a bit of an adventure, but I'm really proud of the result. I wanted to make a new project for Sketcherfest since it had been a few years since I had put out something new. And having a deadline is great. So July 2026 is when I needed to have this book. But I had a lot of ideas, and a lot of them were really in competition with each other in my head. I had some things that were appealing to a broad audience and some to a more niche audience, but I just couldn't end up going with one or the other. I thought about making a guidebook, just a general guidebook, a guidebook for sketchers, maybe a travel book about some of my trips I've done recently. Should I do something appealing to people that live near where I live, enjoy this look or through in the place my where the book bookmaking takes process. place, or a more global audience? I do think there's something about doing something specific versus doing something super broad. Strangely, maybe counterintuitively, the more specific ideas usually have broader appeal, which I think is an interesting phenomenon that translates across a lot of different media. It's also not necessarily about making $1 million from this book, wasn't my expectation. So I was going back and forth through all kinds of ideas like this. In the meantime, I went to a solstice party for winter solstice. There was a fortune teller there, kind of like a tarot reading situation. And I decided to ask, not to the fortune teller, but just holding in my head while the reading was happening, some direction for the coming year, since it was the end of the year and it's good to kind of recalibrate things at that landmark. So I had a broad question like that. And then I drew the fortune teller at that moment from above because it was in a little loft shed barn kind of thing. And it's my friend Josh getting their reading done at that time. It was really interesting reading. I don't necessarily believe tarot is like psychic, and it was very broad, and I just like the way it opens my mind to possibilities I haven't considered before. So I can't remember the exact cards in this deck, but I do remember what the reading was. The first card was about a vineyard, and this symbolized something that takes a long time to come to fruition, something that can't be rushed, because grapes take a couple years to even grow a little bit. So, yeah, something like agriculture or making wine is something that you can't rush. The second card was a sun becoming visible beyond a giant cloud, like a big storm cloud blowing away to reveal the clear sky. And this was meant to mean that the way or the thing I was looking for would become extremely clear, and I would know exactly what it was when I saw it. And then the third card was something about being a super fancy, high quality item, something not about cheaping out and just being a bit of a luxury. So I took all of that and thought that was really interesting. I was especially excited about the middle card about the sky because it felt like I didn't have to stress out about this because I'll just know when it's time to know. But I was still undecided in the meantime. This is a visualization of me being undecided. Still too many options. So I eventually just decided on doing something about Pike Place Market. I was just dropping some things into my InDesign folder and found that I had just a lot of files, something like this, in my desktop. I have a lot of Pike Place Market over the last 8 or 9 years of doing drawings there because I find it extremely interesting and there's always something new to look at. If you're not familiar, Pike Place Market is this big tourist attraction in Seattle that's also so much more than a tourist destination. There are hundreds and hundreds of small businesses tucked in the market on all levels. There's lots of buildings and staircases and alleyways, just a lot of places to wander and discover things. There's really not anything else quite like it I can think of in probably the whole country. There are so many businesses that could never exist in another situation if they were paying market rate rent. The Pike Place Market is owned by a nonprofit, so it's very reasonable rates. Tons of inspiration there, and I love it. And I've also been a guest vendor there a couple years ago, which was a really interesting experience as well because I got to be a part of the market instead of being just a customer or a tourist. You experience the market in a completely different way, and I definitely perceive it differently after that experience. And at the time, I also felt like it would be good to have a Pike Place Market book. I wanted to have some kind of narrative because my favorite sketches from the last 8 years are nice to look at, but I think a narrative to tie them together would really create a common thread through the whole book. So I had to decide how to arrange the pages. Was it going to be a tourist guide, guiding people through the market and pointing out interesting things? A sketching guide could be cool too, but I think it's a little bit too niche maybe because I know a lot of my customers aren't necessarily sketchers. I ended up deciding on doing a spatial arrangement. So it was a bit of a hybrid between the tourist guide and the sketching guide. This meant that it was going to be a walk you could do through the market, and all the drawings will be tied together by their physical locations. I like that it gave the book a purpose, like a reason to exist or something it was supposed to do instead of just being like pretty pictures. It also helped me narrow the selection down from all those market drawings. If it wasn't on the route or close by, it was not going in the book. So it helped me end up with about 30 sketches in the end. So you could also use it as a guidebook because you can see that these are nice places that I could sketch, um, but not necessary to do it that way. You could just enjoy exploring the market. I know every time I go there, I find something new. So I would hope that people would also get that experience by finding some of my suggestions. Overall goals. I was very inspired by Victor Steinbruck's market sketchbook from 1964, I want to say. He documented Pike Place Market back in his day. He was a worked in architecture. He's best known for being one of the activists who saved the market from being turned into a parking garage. And he also helped design the Space Needle. but he's like a OG urban sketcher who documented what he saw in the market. He loved it a lot. And now through going through this book, I could experience a little bit of that world. So wanted to maybe do a spiritual sequel to that and do something for the 2020s. I wanted the production of the book to align with the market spirit, to be local and handmade, support small businesses in my city, and to do a lot by myself by hand. And I wanted to show people some of what I like about the market, my personal experience, as I said before. And of course, I want to show off some of my favorite sketches because I really love a lot of these. So, this is my vision for how the book should look. It should be something close to 8.5 by 11, a little bit smaller so we could crop the edges and have a full bleed and have it not be super expensive to produce by doing some weird sizing that would waste a lot of paper. I wanted to bind it myself. The only real option for a edition of this size is stab stitch binding. You can sew the whole book at once, basically. I thought landscape orientation would be interesting, and it also helps you have more usable area on the page due to the binding style. You lose a few inches on the edge where it's bound. So, landscape orientation means more of the page is visible, and it's a little different and cool compared to how most books look. I did a lot of bookbinding back in the day. I took a bookbinding class in college and learned a lot of different styles. I found a lot of sketchbooks for myself and for other people. These are some ones I made in like 2014. And these are some of the more different art book kind of things I made in college. So lots of different styles, lots of different functions for books. In 2013, I made a Kickstarter campaign where I produced a bunch of catalogs in this style, including some really fancy ones like this one that was a hardcover that was flexible. I guess I made 4 of those. So much work, Eleanor, my gosh. And I also made an edition of the soft cover books. Here they are in process. In 2016, I did another little Kickstarter campaign for some travel drawings I made in Southeast Asia and produced it in a similar style. A little less handmade work, like this was a screen printed cover I did. This was just a digital print that I did. And here they are in process again. So I knew I could do it. My production goals for making this new book were to use as much local stuff as possible, not order anything online, and definitely no Amazon. There's going to be a limited run of 100 copies, and I wanted it to be kind of like a collector's item. So, thinking about my luxury tarot card, I didn't want it just to be a basic thing that's cheap and easy. I wanted this to be a little bit more special and fancy. And I wanted to document the journey of the creation of the book, kind of a meta project within a project. Not only to show people that it's possible to make things in this way, but also so I would have something for my Sketcherfest talk. So overall, the content, I have 30 sketches of the market. I have a loose narrative structure explaining the place and tying the book together. I wanted to have a map showing where they're in relation to each other. I think that was pretty much necessary in line with my concept of having it be a spatial theme. So I kind of chipped away at this project from January to June, starting with the digital page layout and deciding the pictures I would use to getting it printed to all this other stuff I will talk about now. This is the oldest sketch of Post Alley. that I included from June 2018. And the newest one here is of the Athenian Lounge in April. I thought I was going to be making new sketches to flesh out the concept a little more, but I didn't really need to in the end. And I also ended up not having as much time as I thought I would to make this. So I made it work. Here's what a typical page looks like in my InDesign. Pretty straightforward. Just a few elements on each page. And this is what it looks like in the preview mode. And this is the cover page. I got kind of in the weeds on doing some things a little bit OCD here. Like I liked this line down here at the bottom right, but it was too close to the edge for me to feel comfortable. So in Photoshop, I took the image, I grabbed that little line, and then I moved it over. So now it looks, now you can appreciate the kind of level of detail that I did. It's simple, but I wanted it to look really good. The covers was actually the first thing that I produced just because of kind of the timing of this year. The front cover is the packaging of the book, so I wanted it to look very striking. So I decided to do a risograph print. For greater impact, I could use some interesting colors that you can't necessarily get on a traditional digital print. And it also has a more of a handmade aura, which is something I wanted to cultivate in the production of this. The Risograph has a good ratio of investment to quality for a print run of like 100. So if you do like 2 or 3 prints, it's expensive, but making more it's very scalable, basically. So on April 5th was when I had to bring my files in to be risograph printed, and I made this whole cover thing in Procreate, and then I decided it was too busy and I didn't like it. So I ended up messing with one of the my more recent sketches that had a more simple, striking appeal. This is the original watercolor I did last summer at Post Alley, so it's not like the classic entrance view, but I still like it. So I teased apart the 2 layers, the ink and the watercolor in Photoshop, and did some edits to them to make it look a little more intentional. So now it's in 2 layers. I'll talk a little bit about risograph process if you're not familiar. This is a risograph printer. It looks like a big Xerox printer, but it's a little more special. So the way it works is you put one of these ink drums inside the printer. So it prints one color at a time, and they're really big and heavy. So it's a little bit like screen printing because you do one color at a time, but you don't have to do all the manual labor of pushing the ink through a screen. The printer does that for you, and it's pretty fast. So one color at a time, the ink goes in like this. So you have to do your own layering. I go to Paper Press Punch in Georgetown to do these projects. Here's a little sketch of the studio. It's a great place for doing basic bindery things as well as printing, and I just love the vibe. It's in the old Rainier Brewing building. I was a little bit, I don't know, just playing fast and loose with this cover. I wanted to have a colored paper. Didn't have time or like the wherewithal to source it myself because I was also indecisive about how I wanted it to look. So I decided just to see what the studio had and use their paper. I narrowed it down to these 3 papers, or no, 4 papers, and was super indecisive. And under the thing that says which paper is an ink chart, so you can see all the available inks that they have at this particular studio and how they layer on each other. So I was trying to visualize how they would also layer on top of the colored paper. It's pretty challenging to hold it all in your mind at once. So the print studio boss saw me waffling about this and brought out some samples from other people's printing projects. And she was just kind of like, everything looks good on the salmon color. So I said, okay, everything does look good on the salmon color. So I will use the salmon color. There wasn't quite enough, so I ended up using some more of the orchid as well, which had kind of a ripple of consequences afterwards. But here I am getting ready to print the first layer. I decided to do fluorescent pinks because it's kind of special to Risograph to use fluorescent ink colors. And I thought it kind of echoed the Pike Place Market sign. That's like a bright neon reddish pink. And it would be a little attention grabbing too, because it's so bright. So here's the orchid color as well. They look very different because it's different color paper. After that, I put all of the prints plus some test prints in this thing called the paper jiggler, and it just vibrates the papers to reduce static and align the papers a little bit so you have less misregistration issues. The second layer here is in berry color. Not a ton of contrast, but I do like how it looks. So then the prints were done, and it's time to cut them down to their finished size, 7 by 10 inches. You get this big old guillotine thing that can cut like a phone book in one chop. So I was using these crop marks I made, and I kind of messed up my crop marks. So it didn't leave myself a lot of room for error. So some of the crop marks ended up on the prints a little bit, but it is what it is. So I'm lining it up, trying to measure as precisely as possible, trying not to mess up all the prints I just made, and then bringing the blade down and chopping them all. So pretty tight right there. And then you have a very satisfying, clean square cut. So these are the front covers, basically complete, almost complete. I gotta cut it a little more. So a guidebook needs to have a map, and putting it on the back cover meant it would be easy access, because if you're using it as a guidebook, you wouldn't have to open the book. You would just flip it over. I thought that was kind of clever. So I created this map using Google Earth and Street View imagery, as well as some photos I found online, and compiled them. It was pretty hard to not get too overly detailed with it, but it turned out pretty cool. These are some references that I used. I was trying to be accurate, but not overly accurate with things that weren't important to the map. So after I did that sketch, I printed it out and did the lines with an ink pen on paper for the handmade feeling. This was on June 17th, couple weeks before the big deadline. I scanned it in and added some color in Procreate. So one of the ripple effects of using two colors for the cover is that I wanted now to match the front cover to the back cover. So I did two different versions to match the orchid and the salmon color. I then added all of these numbers that correspond with pages so you can easily see where each sketch was. For the sourcing, I wanted to use some specific kinds of materials for this, not to be super generic, and to, again, make it a little bit of a fancy collector's item. So I wanted to use some nicer than usual paper. Yeah, I needed supplies for the stitching of the books, and need to also think through how I'm going to hold all those books from sliding around while I'm trying to sew and cut them. So I need to get some supplies. I need binder clips, string, and I needed a drill press to make the holes for the binding. This is where I got the book printed at G&H Printing in Eastlake, Seattle. So now I got these boxes of prints, but I use this really nice paper called felt finish that has like a cold press texture, almost like watercolor paper, that makes it look just really nice and feel really good in your hands. I was really tempted to just buy like 100 binder clips on Amazon for $11, free delivery. But I didn't have a lot of time this this season with a bunch of projects that happened, but I was still very stubborn in how I wanted to approach this book, so I did not order the Amazon Basics binder clips. Instead, I went to the amazing store, Seattle Recreative, the Georgetown location, because they have all manner of random craft supplies for very cheap. You just have to kind of hunt around for them and not be too picky with what you get. But it's a secondhand arts and craft supply store, and it's like the best. I love Seattle Recreative so much. So this is kind of the vibe of Seattle Recreative. Things you can buy for change you find in your car, things that are free for teachers, random stuff like piano hammers. Who knows why you need that, but maybe someone needs that. I found my mini binder clips for top row. There's 5 cents each. So this is $7.50 of mini binder clips. I did underestimate a bit how many I would need. I wish I was sprung for the $10 of mini binder clips, but it worked out, I guess. It was just so many binder clips. Then I needed to find string. I went to the bulk supplies room, and this is the vibe here. Just bins of stuff you gotta find. You gotta just look around and explore. I ended up finding this really nice cotton thread that reminded me of the market, like what you'd tie up a bakery box with or something. There's only one roll, so I was a little concerned I wouldn't have enough, but it was kind of like the only thing I thought would work anyway, so this is what I got. The last thing I needed to find was the gosh darn drill press, which took a month. I asked G&H Printing. They don't have a drill press. And mind you, this is a drill press for paper. I've used a like one for wood before, and it worked okay. But printers usually have a different kind. So I asked the other print shop I usually work with, and they had one, but it only made holes that I thought would be too large. So I was looking for another option. I asked a cabinet maker that works in my studio building a while ago, and they said, yes, I can help you. But then they flaked on me. Not entirely surprising. There's a bookbinding studio in my building, which I thought was a good option, but they didn't answer. I asked a contractor friend. He doesn't have a press, surprisingly. I asked the wood shop guys in my building twice via email. They did not respond. Capitol Hill Tool Library, they do have one, but I didn't want to use it because I just felt like I wasn't really sure exactly what I was going to get and what quality it was. So that was a good backup option. Wishbone Industrial Arts is a production studio I've worked with before as a freelancer. And they said, yes, we do have one. But due to insurance reasons, you can't use it. But we can get our studio assistant to do it for you. And you can just hang out and watch, and you can pay them some money. And I was like, that sounds awesome. Mostly because Wishbone is just a really great place and I love spending time there. It's so creative. They have a lot of just stuff everywhere. Like, this is the wood shop area in a big state of disarray, which was really fun to draw. And I ended up not going with Wishbone in the end because the bookbinding studio in my building ended up getting back to me. Finally. Better late than never. So they offered to not only drill it, but also sew it as well. And that's great because I had very little time at that point to make the book. I didn't end up finding it myself, but I was really happy to pay another small business to do it, especially one that is just downstairs from my studio. First, I had to collate all 100 books, meaning just get the stacks all set out and ready. It took some time, but there they are. And then I had to put the covers on front and back all by hand. And then I had to clip them all with those little binder clips with some chipboard so the clips didn't damage the cover. And that took freaking forever. This is Callie of Watermark Bindery drilling with the little fancy book drill press. Just all by hand, one by one. 500 holes. And then the following few days, Callie sewed all these books by hand. And then they're done. I ended up getting this other orange and white string that Watermark happened to have around that really suited it and also helped separate the two different versions of the book. And it's done. Oh, such a relief. A mere 2 days before Sketcher Fest, but we did it. So upon reflection, did I succeed in my goals here? I did make it work despite the tight timeline. I got to meet and hang out and just connect with a lot of creative people in Seattle. I had a lot of luck and a lot of grace and this cooperation. Everything kind of worked out by having a kind of a loose idea of how I wanted this to look. And I did stick to my mission of not ordering anything online, being very involved in the process, and not cheaping out on anything. The book does document the market of today, aligns with the market spirit. It was all locally sourced and handmade. Worked with all small businesses, mostly DIY, and it does guide visitors in a new way. And just a little bit about documenting the Pike Place of today. This is a spread from Victor Steinbruck's Market Sketchbook from right by the main entrance here. And this is my sketch from almost the same place. And I thought it was really interesting to look at this because I've been to this spot so many times. I just thought it was always like this. On the right, there's like a shelter roof and some booths, like an information booth. But it clearly wasn't always there. And I would never be able to get this same view now from this spot, even though I know exactly where this is. So who knows how things are going to change going forward. But it might be for better, it might be for worse. But what's most important is that we appreciate the here and now and even put it to paper. Here's another comparison with Victor Steinbruck's drawing. His on the left, mine on the right, obviously. Same place on like 2nd and Pike. You can see all those signs that are no longer there, long gone from the 60s, but yet it's still the same place. Overall, I think this book really represents the shift in my art practice in recent years. I was trained as an illustrator, so my work was always like very commercial, and I was thinking of it mostly as making nice pictures for people to use as decoration, like selling as prints, things with a very broad appeal. But now I'm leaning more into sketching as documentation of a current place and time. And then in conclusion, this book is still hot off the press. It is available on my Etsy store. I think in this day and age, making something artisanal at a higher price point is pretty risky. The economy is always seems to be going crazy, but this year is certainly no exception to that. But I think it's something interesting to try to do rather than just try to be very cheap, minimizing costs in favor of being accessible. This is just one thing I'm trying out where maybe I'm not being as accessible. Seeing how that goes. The whole era of AI and being doubtful about where things come from and how much is handmade and how much is being passed off as real. I think the genuine human handmade thing is a valuable object more than ever in this era, kind of going against the grain. And I think people are also appreciating it now more than maybe they did in the last several years because of that. In conclusion, here is my book. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.